Hi, my name is Mary Isaac, and I'm a FIRST volunteer. I live in San Diego County, and I volunteer for FIRST Technical Challenge and FIRST Robotics competitions, and I'm going to share a little bit with you about what all that means if you aren't familiar with FIRST. I am a member of the Society of Women Engineers. I'm also a mechanical engineer. And very interested in things that move and making sure that they can continue to move. So let's share a little bit about the agenda, what we're going to talk about. I'm going to introduce you to FIRST, tell you a little bit about who participates and where they participate, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about how you maybe can get started with volunteering and some of the current opportunities that are available in San Diego between now, which should be early February, and the end of March into early April. If you like to travel, there's always the opportunity to go to the World Championship, which will be held in, I believe, Houston this year. So let's do a little introduction to FIRST. So FIRST stands for, the acronym is, and we definitely, engineers love acronyms, for Inspiration and Recognition of Science and Technology. And it was founded by Dean Kamen, Kamen, and Woody Flowers back in 1989. They held their first event in 1992, and I believe that there was a movie made way back when about FIRST Robotics, or at least the precursor to FIRST Robotics. They started out with 28 teams, and they competed in the gymnasium. So all 28 teams in one small gymnasium. That was in 1992. And then this year, 2022, so 30 years later, we're over 3,000 teams, and we're in over 26 countries in the world. So that's, a lot of students. 80,000 students have participated so far, 25,000 mentors, and those are the current teams. That's not talking about people that have participated in the past. So that's how many actually worked on things in 2022. But FIRST Robotics is more than just about making robots. They have two concepts that I really value, and one of them is gracious professionalism. And I think it's really important for kids to learn a little bit about what it means to be a gracious professional. And that means if you win, you don't gloat, and if you lose, you don't you don't badmouth other people for winning. They have they're encouraged to help other teams, and frequently when I participate in different competitions, you will find kids that are helping other teams, giving them parts, giving them tools, helping them out, because they know that this is an important part of what FIRST is. The other concept that they play up is co-opetition, and it's a hybrid between the term cooperation and competition. So it's friendly competition. Like I said, if somebody's missing a part, other kids will help them. So it's often very collaborative, and it's very collegial for the most part. Things may get a little bit tense when you're in competitions and when you're having tournaments. Things go very fast. It's very loud. There's a lot of action going on, and things fall apart. So they need a lot of assistance with working through things like that. The other thing, and I didn't write it down here, but the other thing that is important is this is focused on a broad spectrum of participants. So it's not just something that you do in 10th grade or 11th grade or 12th grade. It's something that you can start in kindergarten. If you like working with the littles, you can get involved with the littles. If you like working with kids who my husband calls littles pre-mental, if you like to work with ones that are in the mental stage already, such as high school, middle school to high school, you can also work with them. So let me share a little bit more about how you would get started and what roles you might have available. There are so many roles. So if you like a technical role, I happen to be a robot inspector for FRC, which is the higher grades. I also happen to be a referee for First Technical Challenge, which is the 7th through 12th grade, and that's a little bit of a smaller robot than the FRC. And then you have the littles are working in First Lego League. That can go up to 8th grade. So starts pre-K and can go up to 8th grade. And they're usually using little Lego robots, little Mindstorm robots, NXT, very small setups to accomplish some basic tasks. So what they'll typically learn is how to build the robot. And as I mentioned, I'm a mechanical engineer, so I'm very into things that move and making sure that they move when they're supposed to move. The First Robotics, the FLL League, the very early league, as you see here, that typically starts, the actual competition season, if you want to call it that, starts around November. But it's really a program that runs pretty much all year round, in that people start to get involved with it in the summertime, and then they start building their teams and work on the teams. The FLL League is an intro. Think of it as your freshman team. You know, you're introducing kids to the concepts of robots and coding, etc. Whereas the First Technical Challenge, you could think of that as your JV team, right? And that's the kids, the robots are about 45, 50 pounds. They're maybe 18 by 18 by 18 roughly. They always have a task that they have to accomplish, usually picking something up and stacking it or putting it into a container of some sort. And then occasionally, this is more typically for the higher competition, for the varsity team, for the First Robotics competition, doing things like hanging, you know, finding something to pull themselves up on. So it's a little bit more sophistication. Those robots are typically about 125, 130 pounds. They're, you know, diameter, usually you measure the perimeter of it. And most of the time, the weight is less critical than it being of a certain size dimension, because things on the field where they actually do the competition are sized for certain robots. So if you build your robot too big, it may not be able to accomplish what you want it to accomplish. You can check out this QR code. Just take a picture with your camera, and it can show you kind of what the volunteer roles are that are available. As I said, I'm an inspector, which means you get there early in the morning, the day of the competition. You make sure that the kids followed the criteria that they were supposed to follow when building it. Of course, there's rules. There's a little bit of training, not extensive training, but there is some training that would go along with that. There's always other people there to help you, so you're never going to be by yourself in terms of having to do some volunteer work. So depending on when you have time, mentors are roles that, if you like to work with the kids every week and you want to give them some guidance and some a little bit more helping them with the actual project, building the project, you can get involved as a coach or a mentor, and they're always looking for coaches or mentors. That's typically a more significant time commitment. I don't like to have that kind of time commitment because I have so many other things going on. So I like to get involved with those that are going to only pull me in on a one-day kind of an event, maybe a couple times a year. So I will typically volunteer for half a dozen to a dozen different one-day or half-day events, more typically in the months of January. Sometimes FTC starts in December. As you see here, their program runs starting in September. They can start building. So I may participate in something late in the year, and then again in the early part of the year up until March. The First Robotics competition here in San Diego usually takes place towards late March, and that It starts in January, so it's a very defined period of time that they have to build their robot. And so they have to really be on top of what the requirements are, really understand what the spec is so that they know what they're building. And then when they come to us at the challenges or the tournaments, we will do the inspections and let them know if they're uh, running amok of whatever the requirements are. They have time to go back and fix it. They usually have set up with pits. So each of the teams has a pit where they have their tools and they work on their robots in between competitions. And they'll frequently, if they're running qualification matches before leading up to some of the final championship matches, they may participate 4 or 5 times in the course of a day. So they need to keep their batteries up. They need to make sure that everything is working properly and get any changes that they need to make. Very much like a business, they have to get changes blessed or approved by inspectors before they can go out on the field. So these are some of the current opportunities in San Diego. I just printed out, you may live north of San Diego and therefore be able to go up to the LA area. You may live someplace else. Once you're logged in, if you click this QR code, it'll walk you through how you get signed up as a volunteer. But once you get into the system, you can run some filters over here on the left-hand side. I picked a period of time from February 1st to April 30th. And then I also plugged in San Diego so that it popped up all of the things that are that potentially I might be interested in. So as you see here, there's already a couple things that passed. They're coming up in early February. And some of them, for instance, the Dean List interviews, that's going to involve volunteer judges. So that's another opportunity for you. If you really don't want to do the hands-on stuff, you want to stick to something that's a little bit more subjective, gives you an opportunity to talk to the kids and get a flavor for who did what, because oftentimes in anything that involves adults and kids, you might have some teams whose adults may do a little bit more of the work. So this gives you an opportunity to see which teams are really getting the work done themselves. And I've signed up right now for these 3 events. And once you do sign up for an event, you'll see this little orange banner that runs across it that says pending your application, so that it's usually not a big deal. It's just they haven't gotten to it yet. So these are still some of the events that might be available to you, all the way out until the regional qualification, which in the past has been out at the Del Mar Fairgrounds. But for whatever reason this year, the competition, the final competitions are going to be held for the first robotics competition is going to be held at University of California at San Diego. So UCSD, this is the first time that we've had a regional competition there. So it should be interesting. It's a open venue typically. They will, if they're not, they're usually in a covered space, but for instance, the fairgrounds, we were in where they have the arena. So it's open at both ends, and there's usually the ability to bring cars in because these robots are pretty big that you have to offload. What do I get out of it? It's a lot of fun. It gives you an opportunity to do something and feel like you're really contributing to give back, because these kids are pretty sharp and some of the designs they come up with are pretty amazing from an engineering perspective. And it's great when you find the kids that really understand what they're talking about. So thank you. If you have any questions about FIRST Robotics, and would like to get more involved with volunteering, I'm happy to point you in the right direction. Thanks so much.